Welcome to Leaders with Leverage. I am so excited about this episode. I am with my friend Shannon Cassidy. Shannon Cassidy owns a very successful business. She's an executive coach. She's a keynote speaker. I have so much respect for Shannon. We met many years ago in a leadership program that we were both in, and she has so much wisdom. We talk in this episode about gratitude, the power of it, how to use it. She even gives us a call to action that will be something you'll want to hear. And she talks about getting really clear about your values. So she did not disappoint. Don't miss this episode with Shannon Cassidy. Her company is Bridge Between, and you'll want to listen and then learn more about her by following her, getting her journal, and just being a part of her network. So, without further ado, here's the episode. Welcome to Leaders with Leverage. I'm your host, Susie Tomanchuk, and I am here, as I mentioned in the intro, with a good friend of mine and somebody I highly regard, Shannon Cassidy. So excited for you to be here, Shannon.
It's awesome to be here too, Susie. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, you and I were kind of just talking about, we met through a leadership program in the industry, and I've followed along. You've owned your company for over 20 years now. And I'm like, wow, I've always admired you and the leadership you have and around gratitude. We'll talk about that today. But tell the listeners about kind of your journey. How did you get where you are today?
Thank you for that kind intro. Yeah, I was in corporate America when we lived in Boston, Massachusetts, and I met my husband and we got married while I still lived in Boston, Massachusetts. And then he got a promotion, which was going to move us to either San Francisco or Philadelphia. And that's when I had a decision to make. And so, for all listeners who are maybe at those kinds of crossroads, it was just one of those like, where do we want to live? What do we want to do? And I remember thinking to myself, for all of the companies that I had worked for, I gave everything that I had to my work. I was very resourceful and tried to find ways to get leverage in order to get results. And I decided I was going to start my own business. And my husband was really encouraging of me. And so that was back in 1999. So in 2000, I launched Bridge Between. And I called it Bridge Between because I thought I was going to do corporate mediation because I was really good at conflict resolution
Yeah.
and training. Because, I would do training gigs. So I thought, okay, so maybe this is the bridge between like where people are and where they want to be and like people who are in conflict. And then someone told me about the world of coaching, which I had never heard of before. I only thought of coaching related to sports. And then I got my certification in corporate and executive coaching. And so, yeah, I've been doing executive coaching. I do facilitation, which sometimes is mediation, but it's more often team development and team
Yeah.
dynamics and training, mentoring programs, and then keynote speaking.
Nice. Nice. And so are you surprised where you are today? Was it a discovery? You said you weren't really sure. You kind of like pieced it together. How did that feel like in the moment? I think it's really easy for people to look back and say, these are the steps I took. But in the
Mm-hmm.
moment, how did that feel?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I felt like I really wanted to be of service. That's one of my highest core values is generosity and being of
Mm,
service and trying to leverage your strengths. I'm a strengths-based coach. So I thought I have to, that was the first time I realized how strengths-based I was when I was like, oh, you know what? What I used to do for my team members and in my corporate jobs was to help them figure out what are your strengths and how can you use those. So that was the first discovery or that first point of clarity, I suppose, which is like, how can I be of service and what are some of my strengths? And then how, what kind of a role could I play and how would that fit? And so how would somebody even find me? Which is why I was so thrilled to find out about the world of executive coaching. Because I was like, oh, well, there's a perfect place for
yeah.
people to find support for people who have amazing potential but need help kind of crossing over that line or having that bridge to the other side. So that was a point. And then I think that another point of like discovery or surprise was around the rebound from 2008. So I lived through 2008 recession and then of course the pandemic. So those two
Yeah.
I would say valleys in the trajectory of how Bridge Between has evolved. Um, it was wonderful to have 2008 in my rear view mirror as I encountered 2000 excuse me 2020, because I realized that I can get through hard times
Hmm.
by being of service, so it was like all
Yeah.
the things that you learn in the dark, I think, about how to be in the light.
Wow. I love that. How did how did you find the courage when you were in the dark?
Yeah, I think I just went back to core values. Like something I preach
Hmm.
and believe in wholeheartedly is knowing your core values. Like, what do you stand for? And, part of the reason why you want to know your core values is to help you make decisions and to help you, get through tough times. So, going back to that well and saying, okay, so if I were really going to honor my core values right now, what would I do? And then knowing that I need to be of service, like that is a need I have. So in 2008, I just decided I was going to pivot, a word that everyone learned to hate after 2020. But, like I redesigned the things that I would do. A 9-month leadership program, I would do that in 45 minutes. I would do it in smaller chunks so
Yeah.
that the budgets were a lot more affordable, but I could still find an avenue to help people and their leadership development.
Yeah.
And so I just feel like it's a good example of like always find a way to do the thing that you're here to do, even when there's obstacles in your way. Like I think that just is a catalyst for greater creativity and innovation.
Yeah. Yeah, being agile and as a leader, and even in these times, like, so you work with a lot of executives now. What do you think are those things that they need to do to have that mindset around their career and what makes them successful? What are some of those missing pieces that you help fill in for them?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's not as much a missing piece. I just don't know that they are prioritizing it as much, which is what are their core values? What do they
Yeah.
stand for? What do they really believe in? Particularly for the executive leadership team, like what is their vision for where we're going? Like how is this
Yeah.
all going to matter at some point? And how are you innovating and redesigning your approach so that you're anticipating the needs down the road? So, how are you using your strengths? And then, really, I think the big aha for people is that we cannot do this alone. Like
Hmm.
that, I know that, but I think for some of us, and I'm guilty of it too sometimes, is that I just think I need to be stronger. I need to have all of
Yeah.
the strengths. And I think
Hmm.
that it
I agree.
when the leaders look for who are the right partners that I need, both internally and externally, right? How can I build trust among us so that everybody is using their genius and their strengths to get the work done? And I'm not depending solely on me and my own genius, right? I am part of it, but I'm not all of it. So I think that's one of the big things that I'm working on with leaders is finding the right people to partner with and then trusting them.
Yeah, and it's easy for us to say. It's so hard to do in practice, like to slow down and be really intentional about that.
Yeah.
And I often tell people, especially coming up in their career, these executives have coaches because they know they need somebody, and it's not the magic necessarily of the coach. It's finding that time and that space to
Hmm.
allow yourself to kind of look up from the
Yeah.
chaos of every day, and just making that space can be so impactful. Don't you agree?
Hmm. Absolutely. And then they build the habit of making that space while they're
Mhm.
in the coaching engagement and that partnership. And I think that's a habit that they can continue long after that partnership is complete because they've figured out how to
Mhm.
prioritize themselves, how to think in advance, like how do I want to be today? Not just what
Mhm.
do I want to do today, but how do I want to be today? What kind of leader do I want to show up as? And how do I want to serve these people? How do I want to solve these problems? And they're taking that time, like you said, that precious time to really stop and think, Because that's what I hear every leader that I work with say is, I need time to think.
Hmm.
And so if they haven't already built that into their daily routine, their weekly routine, that's one of the places to start.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting about that? And so, as a tidbit that I would say that leaders take from that and apply it to their people is you have to help them think. You have to ask them. The reason we ask open ended questions is to get people to think about something themselves. And it's so amazing. We see it all the time as executive coaches. It's like we don't help, they come to it themselves, and it's
Totally.
like they feel like you're magic, but you just allowed them to have that time. So
Yeah.
I think leaders need to be more intentional about giving that to their people.
Yeah.
What else would you add to that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And that I would put into the category of generosity, because
Mm,
generosity and generous leadership is something I'm wildly passionate about, and specifically not financial giving, although that's terrific. Philanthropy and all of that is wonderful. But in the workplace, like how are we making space and encouraging others to take the time to think, to take the time to use their own minds, to ask them
mhm,
those higher quality questions, so that we're giving them a catalyst and a reason to think bigger, think differently, think for themselves. And then I think the generosity of curiosity, really, which is that, like, I wonder what they're going to say, not like I
mhm,
hope they're going to say what I think that they should say, but more like I'm asking them the question, and I genuinely am curious and interested in, like, how do you think, how do you
mhm,
process that, what are some of the things that you're including in your own mindset that's enabling you to come out with this thought or this recommendation. So I think for leaders to give their teams permission or encouragement or maybe even mandates to think, and then to, like, accept what comes from that with genuine curiosity.
mhm. I love that. Talk to me about your gratitude journey and that power of that. Tell us a little bit about where that came from and what you're doing, so people understand how big it is.
Yeah.
And then
Oh,
and
thank
maybe
you.
share a story, a few stories about how this is all tied together.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll start with a practical, tangible thing that I created, and it's this gratitude journal.
Hmm.
And back to being of service, like around the holidays, I would think, what could I give people that I think would really help them? And I thought, gosh, I always envied people who were journalers, and I'm not a journaler, but I thought, man, I could write a line a day, right? So I got a notebook, and I just thought, one line a day, I'm just going to write something I'm grateful for, see if it makes any difference. And then it made a big difference in my attitude, my perspective. Like throughout the day, I'd be like hunting for the thing that I was going to journal about. So it kind
Hmm.
of just started to take over my mindset. So I created this journal called Grounded in Gratitude. So it's a one line a day journal. And when I was titling it, I originally wanted to call it Growing in Gratitude. And then I was like, do you really grow in gratitude though? Like, is that
Mm.
where you grow? And then I
Yeah.
thought, gosh, I feel like it's like the baseline, like it's the starting place. So the design of the cover looks like a tree, and there's these roots, right? So I think of the roots as the gratitude. It's like I'm grounded in gratitude. And when I am, what I get to experience is abundance. I am paying attention to the things that I have instead of the things that I don't have. I am more conscientious, aware, intentional about the little things. Like, I really think the little things are the big things, right? Like having this
Yeah.
opportunity to connect with you today. It could be viewed as a little thing, it's 30 minutes, but it's awesome, and it's something I'm so grateful for. So to just capture that grounded in gratitude, that starting place, sometimes what happens is we realize we have so much abundance that we want to pour that out into others, and that's where the generosity comes from. So those two things are siblings. I think they're interrelated. One equals the other. So I think the starting place for your listeners is gratitude. Like, what are you grateful for today? Pay attention to the little things, right? And I think that it's a shifter. So just as an example, in 2020, we got to practice this one of the, I would say, gratitude strategies, which is envisioning yourself without something.
Mm.
So for us to anticipate or to imagine my life without, use something simple like coffee. Say you love coffee, a life without coffee, or a life without my dog, or a life without this plant, or it doesn't need to be
Yeah.
like the big, big things. It could be some of those daily just things that you really enjoy. So you imagine what would life be like without that, and then when you get to have it again, you're like, oh my gosh, thank God there's still coffee in the world because I love this cup of coffee. So I just think that like association with things, and then I think that's why during the pandemic and shortly thereafter, people became much more excited to see each other. They appreciated that ability to be live and in person again. I think we're kind of losing our appreciation for that to some extent,
Yeah.
but it's just a way for us, I think, to savor and to really enjoy those things that you might otherwise be taking for granted.
Yeah. It makes me think about like that abundance. It it sounds so simple, but people don't do it and they don't use it. And that finite mindset and that abundance
Hmm.
mindset makes a huge difference in the work that people do every day.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, here's just one personal example, Susie, of how that played out. Um, I was making a reservation at a ski place for my family to go on vacation. And the woman who answered the phone to help me make the reservation was so unbelievably helpful. And I just followed up with her, and anyway, she ends up just setting up this whole thing for me and my family. Like I went from like trying to rent one room to like this whole thing and then I was able to invite other family members. So I was so unbelievably grateful to her that I sent her a copy of Grounded in Gratitude. And I was like, thank you. This is an unbelievable customer experience. You're just out of this world. So she tells her manager that we had this. Oh, and I want to thank your manager. I want to tell your manager about how great you are. And she did not want to give me her manager's email, but she did. And I gushed on her to her manager. Well, her manager then followed up with me, and she then upgraded us to this like, it was like the presidential suite is what it was called, this place. So then we had a view, it was a ski resort, we had this
Wow.
view of the whole mountain, and I was like, oh my gosh, like never in a million years was that my intention. But
Yeah.
it was just like this whole ripple effect, like everybody felt good about it, and then they were like, what can we do to be more grateful to you, and it was like this
Yeah.
whole thing. And so, you know I think that's like a big example of just how it can manifest in something like
Yeah.
physical. But I think even more so than the room or the vacation was the feeling that we had, that we were so genuinely appreciative of each other. And like like she could just answer the phone and get me a reservation, but she didn't. She asked me questions. She was curious.
Yeah.
She really wanted to make our experience magnificent. And because of all of that, it really was.
Oh, that is so it's so amazing how it just becomes and takes on a life of its own.
Yeah.
And that's such a beautiful story. So I don't mean to like take it to a different end, but it makes
No.
me think of Friends. And I don't know if you watch it, but Phoebe at one point is trying to do things without getting anything in return. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so even getting stung by a bee,
Uh-huh.
and what how those all those things. And so there's always something like your actions do provide this momentum that we don't really often even see or
Mm-hmm.
even appreciate. But if we can just put it out there and just know that it's
Yeah.
creating something bigger than us,
Mm-hmm.
it we don't have to recognize it, just know that it's going somewhere. And
Totally.
what great power that is. It's just think
Yes. I mean, it's agency, right? I mean, like that's
yeah,
what I think all of us crave is like, do we make a difference? Does it
yeah,
matter that I'm here? Do I have value? Yes, yes, yes.
yeah,
And you don't have to do anything in particular, but
no,
being like present and just start with gratitude. I think it's just the easiest way to start because it starts with us inside
yeah,
our own minds, like paying attention, getting out of the trance of being so busy all the time,
yes,
to notice what's going on, then take it one step further when you have the energy and, the willingness to do so, and outwardly appreciate somebody. Tell
hmm
them what they did or said or how they positively impacted you, and then just kind of see how that goes. And you never really know. You might not ever see the ripple effect of that, but just to know that you tried to make your contribution is something so beautiful.
Hmm.
And that it's not so you can get something in return, but the fact is, just like that Friends episode you're referring to, you do. You get so much in
Yeah.
return.
Yeah, you do. It makes me think one thing that I've a practice that I've adopted. I can't remember why I did this, but um back somehow somebody said to me about when you see somebody you don't know, and women especially, when you look them up and down, in my mind I'm going, wow, that's a really cool outfit. I like how she's looking. But she sees me looking at her and she goes, "Oh my gosh, they're judging me." Like we have this like
Mhm. Mhm.
thing. And so I make myself, if I do that, especially if they catch me and say, "I really love your outfit," or
Yes.
"I just admire," and taking that next step to articulate what I'm thinking
Mhm.
so that it doesn't
Mhm.
go without being known, because we very
Definitely.
unintentionally communicate to one another. And just that
Yes.
act can change somebody's day.
Yes, and that generosity of explaining your intent
Hmm.
is that one more step that I think we're both talking about, which is
Yeah.
like, so let's just say we're in a meeting and it's on a Zoom or Teams, and you say something that I find really thought provoking and I make a face, but my face could also mean that makes no sense, or why would she say
Yes.
that? But really what my face is expressing to me is that's really interesting. I wonder like how we could make that happen, right? So for me to just say, Susie, thank you for
Yeah.
making that point. I'm thinking about how we can make that happen so that you're not left wondering, what
Yeah.
was that face all about? Right. And
Right.
that Stephen Covey quote really nails it, which he says, we judge others by their behaviors and we judge ourselves by our intentions.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. And just take, and that isn't hard to do.
Yeah.
It isn't
Eh,
hard to do. I think we're like, we want to keep all of the power for ourselves, or somehow like maybe our insecurities.
Yeah.
But when you let that go, you invite others to do the
Mm-hmm.
same. And that's what builds trust.
Totally.
Ah,
Yes. Or even that, like, maybe what my face is saying to you is I don't understand that. And maybe I think I should understand it.
yeah.
So if I say, excuse me for asking this question, which might seem really elementary, um, could you explain that to me? Because I don't think I understand that. Or even just without all the setup, just say, could you please explain that to me? Because I don't understand it. Or maybe call you later and say, what links could you send me so that I could catch up? Because I feel
Yeah.
like I should have been more up to date on what you were just talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, or like if somebody said something and it continues to kind of brew,
Mm-hmm.
send them an email or go, "I just have to tell you, that point was so good. I keep marinating in it." Like
Yeah,
how easy is that to do? But how often
totally.
do we do something like that? And
Right.
think how that would feel to receive that call from somebody that you respect.
Absolutely. For
Hmm.
sure. I think that goes the same for gratitude.
Yeah.
Like when people do or say something that really means something to you, they have no idea that what they contributed had that kind of value to,
Yeah.
and because they couldn't possibly know, because you put it through your filter into your heart or your mind, and it affected you in a way that only you would know what that
Yes.
was. So you
Exactly.
sharing that generously, and also when somebody does something that's offensive or that you took a certain kind of way, that and generously say, I'm not sure
Hmm.
what did you mean by that? Maybe you get clarification first. Okay, it's just so I'm making you aware how it landed on me, like the way I interpreted it. And I just think that, like, it's not like you're a bad person and you're this and it's not judging. It's more like out of the generosity and courtesy of awareness, I wanted to
Hmm.
share with you how that sat with me.
Yeah. Because we're all having, one of my favorite books is Thanks for the Feedback. It's Harvey
Yes.
Face. Oh my gosh. And I remember I listened to it when I was on a run, and then I got home and I blogged right away, because it was this idea that our blind spots we will never understand ever.
Yes.
Like you could
Uh-huh.
have a room full of people tell you feedback about one thing about you, and you still will never experience yourself from the
Mm-hmm.
outside. So it's this discovery of being able to see ourselves. And that was so, that just like gave me so much liberation.
Yes. And to give you some feedback on your episode on this topic that you're talking about, Susie, that was really helpful to hear you say, communicate with your blind spot. Like,
Mm.
what would it say? And like one of the things you were like, I think you're not listening to me, or you're
Yeah.
behaving as if I'm not here, like I'm being ignored. That kind of, like, it was just such an interesting concept to think, oh my gosh, like that's a part of us. So like
Yes.
that's radical self-acceptance, like that's a part of us. So how can I invite that into a conversation so that I can grow in my own awareness? I just like had never thought of it like that. So thank you for that.
Oh, thanks. No, these little things that like stick with us. It's so interesting how we have these things that kind of go in our mind. And if we share
Hmm.
them, other people have similar experiences. And
Yeah.
you're just like, oh my gosh, just do this. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that was such a funny thing to me. Like I always say, it's like your back of your head. You know it exists. You know it's there. You've seen it in the mirror, but you will never see it for yourself ever. So thank goodness. I think I really have bad looking
No
back of
matter
my
how many houses of mirrors we visit, we will not see it.
ever, ever, ever. It makes me think too. I remember being on a plane and somebody came to me who had worked for me 10 years before. And she
Hmm.
sat by me and she goes, I remember you gave me this little piece of feedback or something, 15 years ago. And she goes, and I used it through my whole career. And I'm like, in my head going, I have no idea. Thank goodness I showed up that day. Thank
Yes.
goodness.
Right.
So
Yes.
I tell people that story so that be in the moment, be
Hmm.
intentional. You never know what you could say that could stay with them. Right?
Yes, yeah, and have some of those nuggets of wisdom that you would be willing to share with people, right? And like, and when you observe an area of opportunity for someone, I think being really thoughtful about that, and back to generosity and all of
Yeah.
that, like really think like, how could I be of service to them? How can I offer them something that could enable them to see a little bit of that blind spot, or maybe
Hmm.
just to recognize an impact that they made, positive or otherwise. I think that's a really generous thing to do. First, notice it, and then think about how do you want to express that in a way that would be the most kind, not nice, meaning like not saying anything, but kind, being I
Yeah.
want to help you grow. And then, how could I deliver this in a way that's meaningful?
Yeah. I love that. And all right, because you and I are both executive coaches, give us a call to action. Tell us what we should do starting today to practice gratitude. Give us something very tangible to use. I
Yeah.
know you have it.
Oh, absolutely. I've got loads of things. I would say the simplest is to get a notebook, and every day, be it the morning, the first thing in the morning, or last thing in the day, you choose whichever is best for you, and write down either what you're going to be grateful for that day, or maybe what you're grateful for yesterday. And at the end of the day, what's one thing that you noticed today that you are grateful for? And I need to express there is no judgment on this. So
Hmm.
if you write the same thing repeatedly, it just means you're really grateful for that thing. Could you
Yeah.
think of other things? Sure, you can. But if that's the thing that keeps coming to your mind, then write that one down and just pay attention to how you feel. I think that would be my call to action. Write it down. Writing it down is better than just thinking about it. So if you were going to like really practice this discipline, writing it down, and then pay attention to how you feel. So then the other call to action would be to do some digging to clarify your core values
Hmm.
so that you have them, you're clear, how to use them when you have to make tough decisions, but you also know that when you're really triggered by something, it's likely associated with your core value, your perception that somehow that core value is in conflict in this situation. So I think, doing your daily gratitude and then clarifying your core values and behaviors associated with your core values, like not just a word like love, but like when I see this, that's when I experience love. When I don't see
Mm.
this, that's when I feel like my value for love is in conflict or it's not apparent in this situation. So those are the two things I would challenge your listeners to think about.
Oh, that was so good. And I always want to talk about leverage. And so, how do you use that to provide leverage, or how do you view leverage and connect that for
Yes.
us?
Well, I love that you have called your podcast this and that you talk about leverage because I think it's so important because leverage is the why to me. It's like the
Hmm.
why would I do something? I would do it because there's enough leverage, there's enough of a reason that this thing has to make sense. So why did I start Bridge Between? Why did you start this podcast? Why are we doing anything that we're doing? Why did you start your business? It's because you wanted to make a contribution. So I think of leverage like the thing that's going to be the catalyst to get us to do something. So to come full circle on the core values thing, I think if your listeners do the practice of clarifying their core values, they will know how significant those things are to them and they can use them as leverage. So when they're negotiating,
Yeah.
they can consider sometimes when we're negotiating, I think what we're really trying to do is make someone value what we value,
Hmm.
and we're never going to win that game. That's not even the game that we should try to be playing. What we could do instead is we could respect that we have different values and we can look at what is the thing that we have in common or what is the problem
Hmm.
that we need to solve together and how can I leverage my values and how can I respect and appreciate yours to help us to get to that elegant solution that both of us feel like we gained something.
Yeah. Oh, so well stated. I'm like so grateful for you.
Oh,
I'm
thank
so
you.
grateful for you. Thank you. Tell people, how can they find you? How can they get your journal? Give us everything so that people can connect with you.
Thank you. So the journal is being reprinted. So we're on a little pause for that. But once it's back, it will be available on Etsy. But my website is bridgebetween.com, or you could just go to Shannon Cassidy, which takes you to bridgebetween.com. Thank you
Awesome.
for asking, and thanks for having me on your awesome show. I so appreciate you.
Oh, I'm doing this because I've seen you be successful, and I kind of draft off of what you do. So thank you for just being you. I appreciate you, and I'm not just saying that. I really do. So thank you. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
And thanks for joining us. This has been Leaders with Leverage. I'm Susie Tomanchuk, and I'm so glad you're here. Make sure that this was cool for you, if you loved this conversation, share it with somebody that needs to hear it too, and tell them that you're grateful for them. So until next time.